It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 decklist of the Commander in front of us. My quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I really appreciate it if you get interact with the video. Like, comment, subscribe. Consider checking out the links in the description. I'd really appreciate it. But today, as we're celebrating Innistrad Mastered, we have lots more Innistrad commanders to come. But today I wanted to take a look at vampires as a whole, right? It's easy to just focus on Markov getting the reprint. Wanted to take a look at vampires as a whole and find other vampire commanders to cover. And this is a commander I wanted to cover for a while, but just hadn't found the spot for it. And I thought now was the perfect time. Today we're talking about Evelyn the Covetous, a 5-mana vampire Grixis vampire rogue from Streets of New Capenna with Flash. Whenever Evelyn or another vampire enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to exile the top card of everybody's library with a collection counter on it. And once per turn, we could play a card from exile with a counter on it if it was exiled by an ability we controlled. And you may spend mana over any color to cast it. This is really interesting. We have these theft style effects. I think we've seen this most recently with like Gonti, right, in Thunder Junction. But I think Evelyn's very interesting for two reasons. One, it's very easy to make vampires. We'll talk about how we're going to do that. So there's a lot of ways to keep getting things into exile. But the second thing I like is it's once per turn, not once per our turn. Meaning that we can actually, if we exile removal or counter spells or what have you, can use those, right, to our advantage on other people's turns. There are always going to be options to blink your vampires and things like that. But the truth is we're not playing as much into that, although that is an option. But what we want to play is ways to get value from casting things from exile, because we're going to be casting some things from exile, including our own things, right? So we want to take advantage of that, make sure everything is causing more value. And if anybody, removes Evelyn, all we have to do is get her back down, and then we can replay all the, then we can play all the things that are in exile. Starting off with vampires, I mean, at the end of the day, there are some really great vampires out there, but the truth is we really want to focus on vampires that either make more vampires or really make our vampires better. Because I think there is a world where eventually we try to win the game in combat, but the truth is we're just trying to steal as much as we can. I love that Bloodline Keeper got that reprint. It was very well needed. It could tap to make a vampire, and then we could flip it over if we have 5 or more vampires to make more vampires, but then give everybody a buff. I like this card. Feels great in this deck, right? Getting a vampire at least one each turn, right? And allowing us to turn that into more exile. Captivating Vampire just got that beautiful reprint. And this is good because it was a very expensive card, just because it was only print once or twice. And this is good because it buffs all other vampires, and then we can actually start gaining control of things instead of just, exiling, stuff off the top. And that's a very useful ability, especially if we have a ton of vampires laying around we don't want to do anything with. Cormella is great in our deck. Not only is she a vampire from Capenna, but she could tap to add Grixis colors and mana and use it only to cast instant or sorceries. Well, this is useful because now we kind of have a mana rock on a creature, right? For our opponent's turns, right? When we're trying to play things out of exile, she's a vampire. She's going to get us the exile. I mean, Cormella is great. And then whenever she dies, we can return something from our graveyard back to our hand, which is a great ability as well. Very useful. The vampire that immediately came to mind when I was thinking of Evelyn, when I saw it the first time, and then when we were building the deck, was Don Andres from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan Commander deck. It says each creature you control but don't own gets +2/+2, has Menace and Death Touch, and is a pirate digital to its other types. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell you don't own, create 2 tap treasures. Well, this is literally perfect for everyone, right? We can cast our opponent's creatures out of exile to get them, and then they get this buff. And then whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we're just getting tap treasures. Like, the fact that it's a vampire is huge for us and very useful for this deck. Drana's going to buff our board. Hitting first and putting a counter on each other attacking creature you control. Again, great for when we start going wide. Drana the Last Blood Chief can help us get some things back out of our graveyard, having our opponents have to choose from a non-legendary creature in our graveyard and bring it back, so that's pretty cool. Indulge Aristocrat can sack a creature to buff all of our vampires. That's pretty useful, especially if we want to sack one of our opponent's creatures. Maybe we cast something for them for cheap and we just want to use it to buff our vampires. That's pretty useful. We have another Grixis vampire in Jaleva. Nephalia Scourge. Whenever it comes in, each player exiles the top X cards from their library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast it, so probably 4, right? And whenever it attacks, you may cast an instant sorcery exiled with it without paying its mana cost. So very dangerous, right? It could potentially hit some pretty good things. But again, just another way to interact with our opponents, steal their things, take advantage of what's going to be there for us. Feature of the Schism, whenever it attacks, player with the most life or tie for the most life gets another vampire with it, so that's pretty darn useful. And then whenever it attacks, well, we have the most life, we draw a card and lose a life, but it's still a great vampire party that can even make more vampires. Sanctum Seeker's here to just hurt our opponents as our vampires attack, making sure that we're turning our vampires from just theft value into actual combat value. And then Stormkirk Captain, just giving everybody else first strike is great. Twilight Prophet is a fun vampire in its own right. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we have the City's Blessing, we can reveal the top card and put it to our hand. Everybody loses X and we gain X, where X is its mana value. A great ability, just incremental life loss and gain when we get there, and we don't mind it, obviously. And it's a vampire, so it triggers her for us, and that's, I think, the important part. Vine Ripper, whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. A great ability on a creature. Again, a little bit hard to target with that ward, but the point is, another vampire that gets us an Evelyn trigger, but also packs good value. Same thing as Yeheni. It can protect itself a little bit by sacking another creature to give it indestructible. It's perfect if we're stealing our opponent's creatures out of exile. If we're casting them, then sack them to Yeheni to give them both a counter and indestructible. Like, Yeheni's kind of a great outlet for that. But I don't think our deck's just about vampires. And I think where we double down is trying to keep taking advantage of theft and thieving our opponents so that we can throw them off their game plan. I think it's easy to say, well, how does the deck win? Well, probably vampires. But the truth is, there might be a way to steal your opponent's key things at the right time and really take advantage of it. The other thing that thieving does is it has a stack of cards that your opponent now have to deal with you playing. You kind of have it a second hand that's wide open, but the point is that they have to worry about that piece of removal that you stole from them 2 turns ago, or you have a board wipe sitting there in exile. It's important that that becomes kind of a fear for your opponent. But I think we want to pay off the theft. Like, I think the easiest one to me is something like, as far as the thieving goes, is Tasha the Witch Queen. A planeswalker that says whenever you cast a spell you don't own, we get to make a demon creature token. Again, not a vampire, but that's okay. We will actually fix that in a second. +1, draw a card for each opponent, exile up to 1 target insert sorcery from that player's graveyard and put a page counter to this. So this can set us up to cast one of those. And then her -3 lets us cast one of them. But the point is that we're going to be making demon tokens. Predator's Hour can give all of our creatures menace, and then whenever they hit, we get to look at the top card, exile the top card of that player's library face down, and we can play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and we can pay mana of any color. Again, just more thieving off the top. Wand of Wonder can roll a d20, and each opponent exiles from the top till they hit an instant or sorcery, and we either get to cast 1, 2, or 3 of them without paying their mana costs. A great ability depending on what we're playing against, right? If we know we're playing against these go wide decks, then maybe we can look for something like an Overwhelming Stampede, or maybe there's a chance where we can hit a key instant or a key draw spell. There's a lot of things you can hit, right, depending on what decks you're playing against. But the reason I said we might be able to fix what type it is because we're playing 2 different blue enchantments that both can turn all of our creatures into a certain type. Arcane Adaptation lets us choose all of our creatures and make them into vampires in addition to their types. Yeah, we'll talk about the ley line on the next slide. Call the Bloodline can have us pitch a card to put a vampire onto the battlefield. This is really fun because that will, of course, trigger Evelyn for the trigger. We can only do it once per turn, so we could potentially do it on everyone's turn if we want to. But the truth is, over the course of the game, not only does this make us creatures to have on our board, but it also is going to exile things from our opponent. I think it also makes sense to play the Flame Shadow Conjuring Molten Echoes style game plan, where whenever you have a creature come in, you can either copy it outright with Molten Echoes, which is on the next slide, or here with Flame Shadow, you can pay a red to make a copy of it. Now, of course, we have a legendary vampire come in. If we pay to make a copy, we have to sacrifice it. But the important part is that it still hits the battlefield. Evelyn still goes off, and that's the important part: is Evelyn going off and triggering. There's the transformation, turning every creature that we have control and every creature we own, basically in our deck or exile into vampires as well. Very useful. There's the Mana Echoes making a copy every time one of that type comes in. And then Virtue Knowledge, right, can double up on Evelyn's ability, getting double the triggers because, 2 vampires coming in would get doubled. And that's important, right? You think about the course of a game, would stealing 15 or 20 cards from your opponent make a real difference? And I think overwhelmingly the answer is yes. But I think we then add on to this by making casting from exile matter. Because the truth is, we're going to be doing a lot of it. I think a lot of the times we'll want to play our opponent's things because they're probably going to have some good stuff. Warp Space, one half of this Charred Foyer Room, says once per turn we can pay 0 rather than the mana for a spell you cast from exile. Perfect, right? It means we can get a spell for free. This actually does mean that we, on everyone's turn, will be able to cast a spell for free, meaning that removal and counterplay that we exile is going to get even better. 6 mana is a large price to pay, but the truth is, man, it's probably going to end up being really good. Now, Evelyn, right, will only let us cast 1 spell for turn from exile, so it's not like we can warp space multiple times in a turn, right? But the point is that I would rather take a free spell every turn and then have to spend a couple mana in case I get into a counter war or things like that, rather than not have that option at all. And I think 6 mana is well worth it. Extraordinary Journey might look odd. It says when it comes in, you can exile up to X target creatures, and for each of those cards, its owner may play it for as long as it remains exiled. It's cheesy removal, but the important part is the second half. Whenever one or more non-token creatures enter the battlefield, if one or more of them entered from exile or was cast from exile, we draw a card, and this happens once per turn. What I love about this is it means as we're casting our opponent's creatures from exile that we get off the top of their library, they're drawing us cards whenever we cast, that's important. I think it's important to realize that this can be removal, but it also can just be value. I mean, this is could be just 2 blue, make sure we draw a card every turn. I think that's well worth itself as well. Fortune Teller's Talent is a fun class we get access to. Level 1 just lets us look at the top at any time. Level 2 says as long as we've cast a spell this turn, we can play cards from the top of our library. Nice, right, to be able to play lands off the top if need be. But level 3 is what we really care about. Spells you cast from anywhere other than your hand cost 2 less to cast, right? Making those spells from exile even cheaper, helping us out. I think these 2 modes do help us out, but this one is definitely useful. The thing I like about this top one is then we know what's on top of our library. We know what's going to get exiled with Evelyn, and we can make better decisions on if now wants to be the time we have that vampire come in. I think it's hard to talk about casting things from exile and not talking about Passionate Archaeologist. So as long as we have Evelyn and Ada at the same time, whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponents. That's pretty useful, right? Paying for some damage along the way. And then the Lost and the Damned. Whenever a land comes in from anywhere other than your hand, or whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, we make a little spawn token. And we can make those spawn tokens into vampires with those 2 cards. But the point is we're just amassing some creatures for what we already want to do. And I think those incremental things we can do for what we already want to do is really important in the mid to late game where we're trying to build a board state. But I've said it before on the show and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Evelyn. And I think going into testing, there's a lot we'd want to learn about some key things. The first is Scheming Symmetry is a card I had on the list for almost the whole build, and I took out because it's a card I really like, but I know people have issues on tutors. And I feel like this is going to be a tutor that might create some bad blood, but it says create target choose 2 target players. Each of them searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. Obviously, right, this would allow us to then play this and set up Evelyn to exile the top card of our library, but that means that it would exile everyone else's too. So obviously your opponents could play around this by just putting a land on top and then it getting exiled. But, the question is, do you like the fact that you're able to search even though you're able to put it on top? And if that's the case, do we play Vamp Tutor? Do we play the ones that put them on top since we know we can exile them? I just decided to leave it out, but it's a card I expect probably is in a lot of Evelyn decks for that reason. Fevered Suspicion is just a ton of fun. Each opponent exiles from the top until they hit a non-land card. We can cast any number of them for free, and then it rebounds. It's a great spell. I really like it. The truth is, I just it's a little expensive for its cost, and I had other slots in the deck for other things, but I think more theft obviously isn't going to hurt our deck. Same thing with Outrageous Robbery. Taking opponents, just exiling X off the top of somebody's library, and you can look at them and play them, which is great. Again, that kind of reminds me of something like, although Villainous Wealth is even better because it lets you cast them. Those style effects where you know which opponent you want to steal from, so you steal from them and you make it happen. The point is, do we need more of the theft? And if we do, we kind of have these cards pinned out that we can head towards. Well, let's get in playtest number 1. Human a 3-lander with that Arcane adaptation, got the Lost and the Damned, got Indulgent, and a Talisman. So we're just 1 mana off our commander, but I think we're headed up the right direction. We'll get that Necropolis in turn 1. Really see the point in doing anything else. Turn 2, I guess it's the Dominance or the Sign in Blood, right, as our choice here. I think Sign in Blood's still going to make us. If I do this in Sign in Blood, my hand's still 1 over. I do this. I could play the Aristocrat, to be honest, but my thought was wait a little bit, wait until we get Evelyn down, and then play it, since it's cheap and it can be a great trigger for us. Here, now this Drone Catacomb can come in on tap. Again, we're 1 mana off, so what do we do with this turn? We could do Lost in the Dam, just get it set up. Same thing with Arcane. I mean, either way, we just get one of these set up, I think. Hold a mana up, and then here on turn 4, I think we play Evelyn, and then, right, everybody exiles 1. Tasha's a great one to exile, right? That's one we really want, right? That's going to keep getting us, right, value when we do. But what I like on this turn 5 is we got 5 mana. You know, we could go Blood Artist, everybody exiles 1. Ooh, Captivating Vampire is pretty great, right? But we could go Indulgent, everybody exiles 1, right? I remember Evelyn says we could play a card from exile, you know, so we could play lands, right? We could get this Unclaimed Territory. Yeah, we couldn't play the other 2 this turn, but we've already used a good amount of our mana. 3 mana left. I mean, we just Arcane for Vampire, right? But the truth is that's now going to set up value here, right? And then if we cast everybody else's creatures, now their Vampires triggering. And I think you could start to see where this value engine board state's starting to get set up. Now, unfortunately, at this point, I can't simulate my opponents. So here on turn 6 with 6 mana, because this Sulfur Fall is going to come in tapped. I mean, if there's anything better that my opponents have, I think we do it. Otherwise, I'm kind of eyeing that Tasha. We could do it in +1. Or we could do it right and set up the next turn where we do that, or we can get the Vampire down and have everybody do it again. Let's do the Captivating Vampire. So now we can't cast another time this turn, but that's okay. That also makes us spawn, right? Because we cast something from exile. And we've got 3 mana left. You know, we just put the Glass Cast Heart. We can't tap it this turn to make that Vampire token, but it's okay. We set it up for next turn. And again, I'll stop here because the truth is I think so much of these mid to late game turns are going to come down to what our opponents have. But that just goes to show you, how do we set up our board to be prepared for what our opponents have? We got a decent amount of Vampires out here. We saw a way to make some spawn tokens. Remember, they're Vampires because of Arcane adaptations, so Captivating, right, is pretty darn close to being online to steal. And I think our board state's looking pretty good. So let's get into playtest number 2. Even a 4-lander with Cormella, an offer you can't refuse, and Terminate. So we got a little bit of counter, a little bit of removal. We got Cormella. Feels pretty good to go. You know, have a Cormella for Evelyn when she gets down. We'll play that Xander's Lounge first, just because it's the only one in our hand that comes in tapped, and we're not necessarily doing anything with it this turn. Turn 2, I mean, I guess it could make sense to play play one of our Vampires, but I'd rather just wait, hold up the Terminate, hold up an offer you can't refuse. Just make sure that we're getting good value. There's Straffon, just a way to make some blood tokens to put some things down for free, but he's not a bad attacker in his own right. I think we just pay 3 for the Patchwork Banner, get the little buff. We can then hold up the offer you can't refuse for our opponents. But then I think here on turn 4, we just play Evelyn. We exile a Predator's Hour, so not bad, right? A way to get our creatures in for some value. And now, right, starting this turn, now we're looking to see what our opponents have. Is it better than what we have? The cool part about Cormella is it's 4 mana, but I can immediately tap 1 into it for 3. So she's not a bad play this turn, right? Because she could tap for 3 mana. Is it only instant and sorceries? But that's okay. I think for my turn, I would just play that Swamp from exile. So I've got 2 mana. 1 of it can go into that for 3. I mean, there's an option I could leave up the Terminate, or, you know, we could just do the Zealot, right, and get another exile. I love the Bloodline Keeper. It was my thought for this turn, but I think Cormella makes more sense because then I can use her mana right on an opponent's turn to do that. I think we keep it up. Maybe there's something in exile. We've got some stuff in our hand, right, to use it for. And then here, 6 mana, we're a couple off Heartless Conscription, a board wipe that actually exiles everything and lets us play it. A beautiful board wipe for this deck. I think we'll just keep her. We get a Mountain. I think I'm okay with that Mountain this turn instead of the Predator's Hour. 3 mana left. to use two mana for the sergeant. There we see a soul ring for future turns, and now we got the mana left to go into Cormello, so we can still use these. And again, I think we're at a decent board state. Next turn, the keeper will start tapping to make vampires. Glasscast Heart can come down next turn and start making vampires to start getting the exiles going as we ramp our way up to a brutal board wipe like Heartless Conscription. So again, I like that one. It looked good. We got to where we wanted to be value-wise. Again, it just comes into what our opponents have for us. Here's a fun one. 5-lander with a Talisman of Indulgence and Lord Xander. If you guys run around for Streets of New Capenna, Lord Xander definitely had the people talking when it was first revealed. Very interesting creature in the head of that Maestro's clan there on Capenna. Whenever it enters, target opponent reveals discards half their cards in their hand rounded down. Whenever it attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded down. And whenever it dies, target opponent sacrifices half their non-land permanents rounded down. So a very dangerous vampire that we have access to there. Here, I think we're just building up, right? The goal is to try to get. I think the goal is just to try to get Evelyn down eternally. Charge Foyer is not bad, but I think I kind of rather wait for Evelyn to get that and get the 6 so we could play that one for free. There we get a Knight of the Ebon Legion. Oh, Tasha's a great draw. Mainly just because then we can start really taking advantage of things in the future. But I think we get the Foyer down. Or the Warp Space, sorry. Get the Ebon Legion. Everybody has to exile again. My thought there was use up all of our mana, and then now on everybody's turn, right? If anybody exile removal, we could play it for free, right? There's some real value there that I think gets better this turn because we could play Tasha and start really taking advantage of that. So if I play Tasha, we tick her up, whether there's anything in anybody's graveyard or not, but the point is we still get to draw the card. 2 mana left. I think I'll just play the Sign in Blood for free, draw 2. I'll lose 2, but that's perfectly okay. And then we still have 2 mana left, so we can hold up this Terminate. If our opponents have anything exiled, right, they get that advantage. But we get the Demon, right, because we did play that from exile. And you could start to see where, right, Tasha's going to start netting some good value. Here on turn 7, of course, we don't have anything sneaking in exile, so I think we'll play the Captivating Vampire. I thought it was Captivating Vampire plus Opulence, just to get some things into exile, just to get some things into exile, see what our options are. Of course, Glasscast Heart looks like the best on our side of the board, but right, maybe somebody on the other side has something better we want to spend our free or, our 2 mana. We could still hold up. Probably could have tapped our land so we could still hold up the Terminate here. But I think I probably just, I would probably go up to the Glasscast Heart this turn for free unless anybody has anything better. Opulence can make us some treasures when things dies. Having vampires, buffing all our vampires. So again, great board state. We've got the free every turn, so that's going to be really helpful. Tasha's going to start taking out our opponent's key things. Let's say they use removal. We could steal it that way. Again, I like the board state. It's doing what we want it to do, and I think we're just missing our opponent's information. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Evelyn down in the comment section below? I think it's a really interesting deck idea for vampires where you're not as focused on the life gain. You're kind of focused on some of these fun steely type things. I think this is going to be really fun to juxtapose to Gonti. We're going to cover Gonti again in Aether Drift since he's in the story. I want to make sure that we cover his card from OTJ again. It'll be fun to kind of put this deck alongside with that one and kind of see which of these steely ideas you like the best. I think I'm more prone to this one because I just like the vampires a little more, but I know a lot of people like Sultai, so I could definitely understand why people would like that. But let me know what you think of Evelyn down in the comment section below, and I will see you all in the next one.